Good morning, our honor lecturers. Today, our group is proud to present the module BUSI1774, the Strategic Management and Leadership. Our presentation today will critically analyze the succession of Howard Schultz and Kevin Johnson at Starbucks. In this presentation, we go into looking at how the contrasting leadership paradigms of two these iconic executives. The first one is Howard Schultz, who had the visionaries, the transformational approach, and Kevin Johnson, who skilled into analytical and transactional approach. These both styles have shaped the futures, the operational efficiency, and the financial strategies of these #1 global coffee companies. In over the next 50 minutes, we will looking at how this theory works in the complicated real life of these multi-billions. Before analyzing Starbucks leadership transformations, we must understand why the strategic leadership is so important today. First, looking at the macroeconomic landscape by 2020s, the global leadership have evolved into the high-stakes challenge, driven by the extreme volatilities, technology advance, and significant workplace burnout. According to DDI Global Leadership Forecast in 2025, we surveyed nearly 11,000 leaders in 50 countries. 71 of the leaders report increasing stress, and 40% of this group, they are seriously considered leaving their job. 80% of the organizations feel that they are lacking confidence in their leadership succession plan. It put in organizational talent balance into a very huge risk. Furthermore, Deloitte in 2025, a report about the human capital trends, have argued that the AI progressively replaced the routine job. The leadership of executives are progressively shifting from the supervising process into the coaching and developing pupils. This transformation requires the leader adaptation. Our assignment will distinct two basic philosophy of the leadership: transformational and the transactional leadership. Particularly in the CEO Starbucks leadership is the center of our presentation today.
Before diving into our case studies, let's quickly review our core definition. In management theory, there is a fundamental difference between managing and leading. As Henry Minberg argued in 1975, management is all about maintaining order, controlling resources, and achieving daily efficiency. In contrast, James McGilvray defined leadership in 1927 as the ability to influence order, establish a shared vision, and inspire long-term change. Now, neither role is naturally better than the other. Today, leadership research views this relationship as an adaptive balance. The amount of leading versus managing that an organization needs change flexibly, depending entirely on its state of growth and the specific challenge it faces, as noted by experts like Nordhaus in 2022. Let's see how it plays out in our global context. Based on research from McKinsey and the World Economic Forum, we can connect general 21st century leadership theory to our Starbucks case through 4 core cues. First, emotional intelligence and servant traits. This means placing people at the very center of decision making. Second, vision and positive energy. This is the ability to inspire and lead change. Both of these first two traits are closely linked with the Howard Schultz. Third, hack mindset and analytical skill. This is involved using digital tools to boost profits, and trait heavily linked with the Kevin Johnson. And finally, adaptive and continuous learning. This is the ability to guide an organization through a crisis, which both leaders absolutely have to demonstrate at a different point. To see how these skills come to life, let us begin our first executive profile.
Let's examine Howard Schultz, who grew up in a working-class family in Brooklyn and joined Starbucks in 1982 in marketing before acquiring a company in 1987. His defining trait is storytelling built around a personal mission, recreating the Italian espresso bar culture in an accessible third place in America. Schultz rose through sales and marketing and had no formal background in technology or operation optimization. This origin shaped a leadership style centered on human experience, oriented rather than system thinking. He possessed exceptional high emotional intelligence (EQ) and built his approach around selling an experience, the third place concept, rather than the coffee as a mere commodity. His defining traits are storytelling and treat staff elasticity as a partner rather than employee. setting the stage for his transformational and servant leadership style. Subcontract to Schultz, led by Kevin Johnson. He was trained as software engineering and spent 16 years at Microsoft, and including the role as a president of the platform and service division, overseeing global sales and services before serving 5 years of the Juniper Networks. Engineering mindset set a leadership style that is highly system-oriented, data-driven, and process-focused. Especially, it was Johnson himself who, while at Microsoft, led a project that brought Wi-Fi into Starbucks store in 2001. And the exact point which he saw first met. This early technical grounding explains why his subsequent tenure as a CEO concentrated heavily on the mobile order and pay, the reward program, and digital operation. Definitely hallmark of the transactional leadership. To understand how these traits translate into actual behavior, we apply robust CAS classic 3-skill model of managerial effectiveness. CAS argues that the leadership requires 3 core skills: conceptual, human, and technical skill. Conceptual skill is the ability to recognize environmental change and set overall approach. Human skill is the ability to work with people. And technical skill is the proficiency in the specific functional area. Power Short excellent in conceptual and human skill, and hit visionary foresight, the third place, and hit people first partner. Johnson, conversely, he possessed strong technical skill and conceptual skill. His engineering background gave him an also lot technical command over the digital transformation. However, his human skill in emotional trust were frontline retail pedestal were his relative vulnerable.
Let us now apply the same critical comparative lens to our first leader, Howard Schultz is the quintessential embodiment of Bernard Spath's transformational leadership, operating firmly under macro theory, which assumes that employees are self-motivated and seek purpose in their work. We can deconstruct success through the academic framework of the 4L of transformational leadership. First, for inspirational motivation, Sir did not share coffee. He projected a powerful, the shared vision of the third place, a sacred communal space between home and work. Second, for individualized consideration, he pioneered employee welfare, offering comprehensive health care and beanstalk option runs to part-time barista as early as 1988, followed by the ASU college program in 2014. Third, for ideal influence, when the brand lost its way in 2008, Schultz acts as a moral role model. He made the dramatic decision to close 7,100 US stores for 3.5 hours, sacrificing $6 million in raw afternoon revenue to personally retrain barista in the handcrafted art of the espresso. Finally, intellectual stimulation, he empowered local store managers to wreck corporate model to design, localize, and community-centric store experience. Yes, we must critically analyze the dark side of this style, charismatic fragility, because Schultz's transformational style was born to his personal, emotional charisma. Starbucks fell into classic succession trap. Every time he stepped down, the culture he felt, forcing him to return as CEO 3 separate times because professional managers struggle to replicate his emotional authority. Furthermore, his focus on emotional value often came at the expense of strict operational controls. By his final return in 2022, his traditional family failed to pacify frontline barista who were burned out by modern retail demand, leading a massive wave of unionization across over 300 stores. This proved that transformational leadership, which suffers for culture building, is structurally fragile without operational systems. Now, transactional leadership aspires the rising, operate through contingent reward and management by exception. Performance is challenged for clearly measurable target rather than shared purpose. Now, let's show the success at Kevin Johnson operational transaction leadership and critical evaluate its ultimate breaking point. Taking the helm in 2017, Johnson shifted Starbucks' focus from emotional storytelling to digital decision. Under his role at Scale Agenda, he introduced Deep Blue, an AI engine that fully automates routine, inventory, and label scheduling. This is classic application of bonus bar management by exception, where manage routine operations so manager can focus fully on execution. That transactional system successfully scaled the reward app up to 23 million active members, driving 52% of US sales by 2021 and pushing revenue to a record $29.1 billion. That's a good result. However, this metric-driven focus engineered the human element right out of the third place. Frontline barista began to feel like cogs in a high-speed machine, completely overwhelmed by relentless influx of mobile orders. This intense pressure creates several rising of employee trust and burnout, culminating in a history unionization right affecting over 300 stores. Johnson ruled that while a transactional system can successfully optimize global operation, they cannot sustain human commitment without transformation, empathy.
Kevin Johnson drew a very clear line between his style and his predecessors, telling reporters in 2017, "I realized I'm not Howard, I'm Kevin." This distinction was later echoed by the Wall Street Journal in 2019. Starbucks CEO Kevin Johnson writes in predecessor's ambitions, "I'm not Howard." This quote established the theoretical boundary. Johnson did not attempt to be an emotional evangelist. He led through systems management and discipline. To ground our analysis in objective reality, let us review our consolidated financial and operational metrics spanning 2008 to 2022. The data reveals a fascinating story. Under Schultz Transformational range in 2013, Starbucks achieved an exceptional customer satisfaction CSI score of 80, alongside low employee turnover, but experienced higher operational volatility. Under Johnson Transactional, digital-first leadership, corporate revenue scaled to a record $29.1 billion in 2021, and the global store footprint expanded to over 34,000 stores. However, this financial peak was accompanied by a sharp rise in employees' turnover and a drop in customer satisfaction as baristas struggle with mobile order volumes. This empirical data proves that while transactional leadership is highly effective for scaling financial margins and physical footprints, it risks eroding the core human-centric assets that sustain long-term brand value. To widen our academic scope, let us briefly contrast our core findings with other prominent leadership approaches, specifically situational leadership and servant leadership. Compared to situational leadership, Hersey and Blanker, 1969, Howard Schultz's approach can be read as inherently transformational, regardless of context. He always relied on vision and emotional appeals. Johnson's data-driven style, however, aligns more closely with a situational response, carefully calibrated to the operational maturity of the business. Compared to servant leadership, Greenleaf 1970, Schultz's early investment in partner healthcare and equity benefits shows overlapping servant characteristics, putting frontline workers' well-being first. Conversely, Johnson's leadership rarely foregrounded employee needs above operational metrics, reinforcing his positioning within the transactional paradigm.
In March 2022, Howard Schultz returned as Starbucks interim CEO for the third time, ending Kevin Johnson's 5-year tenure. This return did not happen because Johnson had failed operationally. On the contrary, digital performance metrics rose steadily. It happened because the company faced a post-pandemic culture crisis. Under staffing pressure, safety concern, and relentless operational throughput target during the COVID-19 period create the perfect condition for the Starbucks Worker United Union movement to erupt. Many employees describe feeling is hostile, alienated, and treated as replayable part of the optimization system, effectively as a coffee-making machine rather than value partner. And this is precisely the inherent weakness of traditional leadership. Identify the theory, the continent reward merchandise can sustain output, but it's not building less emotional commitment. And a cultural crisis for the nature require a transformation leader capable at the healing the relationship with employees. So what we do recommend an ambidextrous leadership model. Drawing on the Starbucks case, we propose the ambidextrous leadership model as the appropriate strategy framework for the 2020s. No global organization can survive without a culture along the Scott model or a system along the Johnson's model. Future strategic leader must stimulate the needs, master two parallel capabilities. First, exploitation, discipline, KPI-driven digital performance management that ensure the operational efficiency and scalability, which Johnson has implied. Second, exploration. Exploration is empathy and value-led leadership that sustains trust, meaning, and long-term loyalty, which Scott has amplified. The Starbucks case shows that the two capabilities do not serve as cyclical alternatives that leaders swap in and out in the different stages. Instead, they are capabilities that must coexist, ideally distributing across the entire leadership term, rather than straight on a single CEO who must quit model every time in the new crisis emerge.
Now, let us examine a specific business challenge, crisis and cross-cultural leadership. In April 2018, two black men were arrested at Philadelphia Starbucks after an employee called the police while they were waiting to meet a friend. The incident quickly escalated into a global boycott movement tied to allegations of systemic racial bias. Although Kevin Johnson's default style was transactional, his response to this specific crisis was profoundly transformational. He appeared in the media to apologize personally and immediately, and ordered the closure of more than 8,000 US stores in a single afternoon at an estimated cost of tens of millions of dollars to deliver unconscious bias training to approximately 175,000 employees. Now, let us address a fascinating paradox that is central to our critical analysis. If Kevin Johnson is fundamentally a transactional leader, why was he able to successfully resolve the 2018 Philadelphia racial crisis, which was a crisis of trust and culture, using a transformational response? The answer lies in two strategic concepts. First, crisis taxonomy. Johnson paused the self-awareness to realize that transactional tools like policy memos or files cannot solve a crisis of human trust. It demanded a massive, symbolic action to heal the brand soul. This is front-end transformational leadership. The key lesson here is that the ability to flexibly shift leadership style during a crisis is essential to protecting brand trust. A poorly transactional response, such as an internal policy memo, would not have restored public trust. The crisis demanded a visible, values-based act of leadership. From the two types of crisis Starbucks faced, a clear classification principle emerged for global leaders. For operational crises such as COVID-19 pandemic, an organization needs a transactional, data-driven approach to respond quickly and precisely on supply chain logistics, financial liquidity, and the rapid shift toward contactless mobile ordering. For trust and culture crises, such as the Philadelphia incident in 2018, an organization must use a transformational leadership to publicity and authentically reaffirm its core value. In other words, the nature of the crisis itself, not the leader's personal preference, should determine which leadership is deployed. But here is the real critical takeaway. A transformational message is useless without transactional execution. Close your eyes and imagine the logistic of shutting down over 8,000 stores and coordinating anti-bias training for 175,000 employees simultaneously in one afternoon. This was a monumental logistical feat. It required the precise operational systems, data scheduling, and strict administrative discipline that only a transactional master like Johnson could execute. Therefore, Philadelphia was not a failure of transactional style. It was the ultimate victory of ambidextrous leadership, where a leader used a transformational message to heal the heart, but deploy a transactional machine to make it a reality.
To conclude our presentation, what is the single ultimate lesson of the Starbucks story? We want to leave you with this core message. In a complex global landscape, no single leadership theory guarantees success. Ensuring organizations require leaders who can pivot between the heart of a visionary representing transformational leadership and the mind of a systems architect representing transactional management. The Starbucks story, from Schultz 2008 revival through Johnson digital scaling era back to Schultz return in 2022, is the clearest living demonstration of this cycle in real-world business practice. Leaders must be flexible, culturally sensitive, and operationally disciplined to ensure long-term, sustainable success. Thank you very much for your time and attention.